"Come with me," the Duke said, after seeing the widow and her kids alone in the blizzard. She was on her knees in the snow, her bare hands wrapped around her son's lifeless fingers, breathing into them with the desperation of a woman who had already buried one love and would rather die than bury another. Her daughter's whimpers had stopped 10 minutes ago, a silence more terrifying than any scream. The blizzard screamed for them instead, swallowing the road, the trees, the last shreds of Eleanor Ashford's pride. She had left the coaching inn with her chin high and her children's hands in hers, choosing dignity over charity. Now she understood. Pride was a luxury. Warmth was survival. And she was failing at the only thing that mattered. Wait, before the next confession unfolds, if this story has already stirred your heart, tell us where you're watching from. To make sure you don't miss the next betrayal, kiss, or redemption, subscribe and join our circle. The next heartbeat might change everything. Now, back to the scene. "Mama," Thomas's lips were blue. 7 years old, and he spoke like an old man surrendering. "I can't feel my feet." "Shh, my darling, shh." Eleanor pulled both children against her body, though she had no heat left to give. Her cloak, the only fine thing she'd salvaged from her old life, was wrapped around 6-year-old Iris, whose closed eyes looked too much like death. "We're almost there." A lie. They were 2 miles from Ashford Village, the home she'd abandoned when she married Captain Henry Ashford 5 years ago. The home that had turned its back when she'd returned, a widow with 2 fatherless children, and accusations trailing her like smoke. The captain's death was her fault, they whispered. She drove him to it with her cold heart. Eleanor had endured the whispers. She had endured the slammed doors, the refused lodgings, the innkeeper's wife who'd said, "We don't harbor women of questionable virtue."
But she could not endure watching her children freeze. She pressed her forehead to Thomas and prayed to a God who seemed to have stopped listening months ago. The sound of hooves was so faint at first she thought she'd imagined it, a phantom born of desperation. But then the jingle of harness bells cut through the wind, and a dark shape materialized from the white chaos, a massive black carriage with lanterns blazing gold, pulled by 4 horses that looked like they'd been carved from midnight itself. Eleanor stumbled to her feet, dragging her children up with strength she didn't possess. She waved her arms. "Please, please, stop!" The carriage slowed. A footman in forest green livery jumped down, his face shocked beneath his frost-rimmed hat. But Eleanor wasn't looking at him. She was looking at the man who descended from the carriage with the controlled grace of someone who had never begged for anything in his life. He was tall, absurdly tall, with shoulders that filled his black greatcoat like he'd been built to carry the weight of empires. His hair was dark, swept back from a face that might have been handsome if it weren't so brutally cold. High cheekbones, a jaw carved from granite, and eyes the color of a winter storm. Gray, merciless, seeing everything. Eleanor recognized those eyes. Everyone in 3 counties knew those eyes. Sebastian Thorne, 6th Duke of Greymore, 32 years old, unmarried, untouched by scandal because he was too powerful for scandal to dare approach. Owner of Greymore Abbey, 50,000 acres, and a reputation for ruthlessness that made strong men step aside when he walked past. And Eleanor had just thrown herself at his mercy. "Your Grace," her voice cracked. She forced it steady. "Please, my children, they're freezing. If you could take them to the next village?" "Get in." His voice was granite wrapped in ice. Eleanor blinked. "I beg your pardon?" "The carriage. Get in. Now." He didn't wait for her response. He bent and scooped Iris into his arms with shocking gentleness, a strange contradiction from hands that looked like they'd been made for violence. The little girl didn't stare. "She's breathing," the Duke said, as if he'd felt Eleanor's terror spike, but barely. "Your son?" Thomas was staring up at the Duke with the wide-eyed wonder of a child who'd only ever heard legends.
Are you a king? No. The Duke's mouth didn't smile, but something flickered in those storm-cloud eyes. Merely a Duke. Can you walk? Thomas nodded, though his legs shook. Then walk to the carriage, hold the footman's hand. The Duke's gaze cut to Eleanor. You, in, now. It wasn't a request. It was a command from a man who'd never had a command refused. Eleanor climbed into the carriage on numb legs, and the world transformed. Warmth enveloped her like an embrace, blessed, shocking warmth from heated bricks wrapped in velvet. The interior was burgundy leather and polished wood, with lamps that cast a golden glow over seats that could have held 6 people in comfort. The Duke placed Iris on the seat beside Eleanor, then lifted Thomas in after. He barked an order to his driver, Graymore, fastest route, and climbed in, folding his considerable frame into the seat opposite. The carriage lurched forward. Eleanor immediately stripped off her wet cloak and began rubbing Iris's hands, her feet, murmuring prayers and promises and desperate pleas. "Remove her boots," the Duke said. Eleanor's head snapped up. "I beg your... Her boots are wet. They'll trap the cold. Remove them. And his." He was already unwrapping one of the heated bricks, handling it with a folded cloth. "Once their feet are bare, wrap them in this." Eleanor obeyed, too desperate to question. Iris's tiny feet were white as marble, her toes a terrifying blue. Eleanor's hands shook as she wrapped them in the heated velvet. "Don't rub them," the Duke said sharply. "It causes damage. Just warmth. Gradual."
How do you... I was a soldier before I was a duke. He was removing his own greatcoat now, revealing a perfectly tailored black jacket and waistcoat beneath. He draped the enormous coat over both children. I've seen frostbite. I know what it looks like when it's caught in time. His eyes met Eleanor's. They'll live, if we're fast enough. That last phrase hung in the air like a threat and a promise. Eleanor pulled Thomas against her, wrapping her arms around both her children. "Thank you," she whispered. "Your Grace, thank you." "Don't." The word was brutal. "Don't thank me yet." The carriage raced through the storm, swaying and creaking. The Duke sat in perfect stillness, watching the children with an intensity that should have been unnerving, but somehow wasn't. Eleanor studied him in the lamplight, the harsh planes of his face, the scar that cut through his left eyebrow, the way his jaw tensed every time Iris's breath hitched. "Why were you on that road?" he asked abruptly. Eleanor's spine stiffened. "I was traveling." "In a blizzard, with 2 small children, on foot." His tone suggested he was cataloging evidence of her insanity. "Where is your husband?" "Dead." The word came out harder than she'd intended. "Captain Henry Ashford, killed in action 8 months ago." Something shifted in the Duke's expression. Recognition, perhaps, or something darker. "You're that widow." Eleanor's blood turned to ice that had nothing to do with the weather. "I don't know what you mean." "Yes, you do." He leaned forward slightly, and Eleanor saw what men fear him, not cruelty, but absolute, unflinching clarity. The whole county knows. The captain's wife who couldn't weep at his funeral, who inherited nothing because he'd gambled away his commission and died in debt, who returned to her father's village only to be cast out. His eyes narrowed. "The village gossips say you drove him to his recklessness, that you withheld your affection until he sought death as an escape."
Eleanor couldn't breathe, couldn't move. The words were knives, each one finding the exact places she'd tried to armor. "The gossips," she said, her voice trembling with fury she'd suppressed for months. "Know nothing." "Then tell me what they don't know." "Why?" Eleanor demanded. "So you can judge me too? So you can add your voice to theirs?" "No." The Duke's voice dropped to something almost gentle, a tone so unexpected it was more shocking than his earlier coldness. "So I can know whether you're running from shame or injustice, because where this carriage is going, Mrs. Ashford, will determine what happens next." Eleanor looked at her children, Thomas fighting to stay awake, Iris's color slowly, painfully returning. She thought of the months of running, of doors slammed in her face, of landladies who looked at her with contempt, and inns that had no rooms when her coins ran out. She thought of her son asking 3 nights ago if God had forgotten them. "My husband," Eleanor said quietly, "was a good man when I married him. Honorable, kind." She paused, choosing her words like weapons. "But he was also weak.
He couldn't bear that I brought no fortune to our marriage. He'd believed my father's lies about a dowry that never existed. When the truth emerged, Henry felt betrayed, humiliated. Her hands tightened on Iris's small body. He began to gamble, to drink, to take risks in battle that had nothing to do with courage and everything to do with escape. And you? I tried to save him. I begged him to stop, to come home to us, to let me find work to support the family. He said I'd shamed him enough. Eleanor's voice cracked. The night before he died, he came home drunk. He said I'd ruined his life, that marrying me was his greatest mistake. He said he was going to volunteer for a suicide mission, and if I'd ever loved him, I'd let him go with a clear conscience. The carriage was silent, except for the storm and the children's breathing.
I told him I couldn't give him that, Eleanor whispered. I told him his children needed him alive more than his pride needed him dead. He struck me, the only time he ever did, and left. He died 3 days later, leading a charge that every officer had deemed impossible. And the gossips say you drove him to it. His commanding officer wrote to his mother, Lady Ashford. He said Henry had been seeking death for months, that I'd begged the regiment to intervene, to send him home, but Henry had refused. The letter was kind, honest. Eleanor's laugh was broken. Lady Ashford burned it. She told everyone I was a cold, grasping woman who'd destroyed her beloved son. And people believed her, because what widow doesn't weep? What wife survives her husband's disgrace without carrying the stain of it? The Duke was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was different, rougher, as if something inside him had shifted. Where were you going? In the storm? Anywhere. Eleanor met his eyes. Away from Ashford, away from the whispers. I had enough coins for 3 days' lodging and food. I thought I could reach the next county. Find work as a governess, perhaps. I have an education. I can teach. Her voice turned bitter. But the innkeeper's wife tonight looked at me, at my worn dress and my hungry children, and saw a woman with no husband and no prospects. She said I looked like I brought trouble. She wouldn't let us stay. So you walked into a blizzard. I made a choice. Eleanor's chin lifted. My children would not spend the night listening to me beg from someone who'd already decided we weren't worthy of basic human decency. If we were going to freeze, we would freeze with dignity intact. Dignity. The Duke's voice was strange, almost admiring. Yes, Eleanor's voice broke. Yes, it would have. And I will carry that knowledge for the rest of my life, that my pride nearly murdered my own children.
Thomas stirred against her, mumbling something about snow angels. Iris's fingers twitched. The heated brooks were working. "What is your education?" the Duke asked abruptly. Eleanor blinked at the shift. "I beg your pardon?" "You said you could work as a governess. What were you taught?" "Reading, writing, mathematics, French, watercolors, pianoforte, the globes, history." Eleanor stopped. "Why does it matter?" "Because Graymore Abbey," the Duke said slowly, "is where this carriage is going. It's my home. And as of this moment, Mrs. Ashford, you have a choice." The carriage swayed. Eleanor's heart hammered. "I can take you and your children there, call my physician to ensure they're healthy, give you dry clothes and hot food and a warm bed for the night. In the morning, I'll provide you with funds and a letter of reference to a governess agency in London. You'll never see me again." He paused. "Or." That single word hung between them like a sword about to fall. "Or," Eleanor whispered. The Duke of Graymore leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his storm-gray eyes locked on hers with an intensity that stole her breath. "Or, you stay. You become governess to a child who desperately needs one. You live at Graymore under my protection, with your children beside you, housed and fed and safe from every gossip in England." His voice dropped. "In exchange, you give me 1 year. 1 year of service, of discretion, and of trust." "Why?" The word burst from Eleanor.
Why would you offer this to a stranger, to a woman the whole county despises? Because, the Duke said quietly, I know what it is to be despised for things beyond your control. And because the child who needs you is my ward, my late brother's daughter. She's 8 years old. She hasn't spoken a word in 6 months. And every governess I've hired has fled within a fortnight, claiming she's either possessed or incurably broken. Eleanor's breath caught.
What happened to her? Her father, my brother, died in the same battle as your husband. Her mother died giving birth to her. She has no one but me, and I. The Duke's jaw tensed. I don't know how to help her. But you, Mrs. Ashford, have kept 2 children alive through hell itself. If anyone can reach a girl drowning in silence, it might be a mother who refuses to surrender. The carriage turned, and through the window Eleanor glimpsed iron gates appearing from the snow. Beyond them, towers rose against the storm. Graymore Abbey, vast and Gothic and impossibly beautiful. 1 year, the Duke repeated, and I promise you this, while you are under my roof, no one will dare speak against you. No one will turn you away. Your children will be safe. You will be safe. Eleanor looked at Thomas, fighting sleep, at Iris, whose breath was finally steady and strong. She thought of running, of more cold roads and locked doors and nights wondering if tomorrow would be the day her strength finally broke. She thought of her son asking if God had forgotten them. What is her name? Eleanor asked. Your ward. Amelia. Something almost soft entered the Duke's expression. She has her mother's eyes and her father's stubbornness. She loved horses and fairy tales and singing. Before she stopped speaking, her laugh was... He trailed off. I want to hear her laugh again. Eleanor made her decision the way she'd made every decision since Henry died, by asking herself what kind of mother she wanted to be. The kind who ran, or the kind who fought? I'll stay, she said, for 1 year. I'll help Amelia. I'll earn my keep and your trust. The Duke extended his hand. Then we have an accord, Mrs. Ashford. Eleanor took his hand. It was warm, strong, scarred along the knuckles, and shook it once. We do, Your Grace. The carriage passed through the gates of Graymore, and Eleanor understood that she was entering a new world entirely. Not running anymore, not begging.
Bargaining with a duke who looked at her like she was a puzzle he intended to solve. And somehow, against all reason, that felt less terrifying than the blizzard she'd left behind. Graymore Abbey wasn't a home, it was a kingdom rendered in stone. The carriage swept up a tree-lined drive, and Eleanor pressed her face to the window, watching the building emerge from the storm like something from a Gothic tale. 4 stories of gray stone, with towers at each corner and windows that glowed with warm light. Gargoyles perched along the roofline, ancient, weathered, staring down with expressions caught between protection and warning. The carriage stopped before a massive oak door. Immediately, servants appeared, footmen with umbrellas, a butler whose silver hair and impeccable posture suggested he'd been born wearing a tailcoat, housemaids in crisp uniforms. Mrs. Pembroke, the Duke called, and a woman in her 50s materialized, the housekeeper, Eleanor guessed, from her black dress and the ring of keys at her waist. Prepare the rose suite for Mrs. Ashford and her children, immediately. Send for Dr. Blackwood, and bring warm milk and broth to their rooms within the quarter hour. At once, Your Grace. Mrs. Pembroke's gaze flicked to Eleanor, assessing, not unkind. Welcome to Graymore, madam. The Duke lifted Iris himself, still wrapped in his greatcoat, and strode into the abbey. Eleanor followed with Thomas's hand in hers, 2 days to fully process the grandeur. Marble floors, a staircase that swept upward in a graceful curve, portraits of stern-faced ancestors lining the walls, and a chandelier the size of a carriage glaring overhead. The Rose Suite was on the 2nd floor, a sitting room connected to 2 bedrooms, all decorated in soft pinks and creams, with a fire already blazing in the hearth. The Duke laid Iris on a cushioned settee near the warmth, and stepped back as a maid appeared with blankets. Dr. Blackwood will examine them both, he said to Eleanor. He's discreet and competent. Trust him. I do, Eleanor said, though she didn't know why she believed him.
The Duke turned to leave, then paused. Mrs. Ashford. Yes, Your Grace? You made the right choice. Staying. Before Eleanor could respond, he was gone, the door closing softly behind him. The next 2 hours blurred together. Dr. Blackwood, a kind-faced man with gentle hands, examined both children and declared them miraculously unharmed. Mild frostbite on the extremities, but caught in time. They'll heal completely. Keep them warm, give them broth and rest. He'd given Eleanor a look that mixed approval with concern. You're a fortunate woman, Mrs. Ashford. Another half hour and... He hadn't needed to finish. Eleanor fed her children warm milk and honey. She tucked them into beds softer than clouds, with blankets that smelled of lavender. Thomas fell asleep mid-sentence, asking if the Duke had a dragon. Iris curled on her side, her thumb in her mouth, a habit Eleanor thought she'd outgrown, and slept with the stillness of absolute safety. Only then did Eleanor allow herself to collapse. She sat by the fire in the sitting room, wearing a borrowed nightgown and robe that Mrs. Pembroke had provided, and let the tears come. Silent, shaking tears of relief and terror and exhaustion. She'd nearly killed them. Her pride, her stubbornness, her refusal to let the world see her beg, it had nearly cost her everything. A soft knock on the door made her swipe at her eyes. Come in. Mrs. Pembroke entered with a tray, tea, sandwiches, and a small glass of brandy. His Grace thought you might need sustenance, madam. That's very kind. Eleanor's voice was hoarse. The housekeeper set the tray down and studied Eleanor with sharp eyes. Might I speak plainly, Mrs. Ashford? Please. This household has been waiting for you. Eleanor blinked. I beg your pardon. Not you specifically, Mrs. Pembroke amended. But someone like you, someone who doesn't frighten easily, someone who looks at a problem and sees a person. She folded her hands. Lady Amelia, she's not wicked or mad or possessed, as the gossips claim. She's a child in pain. And His Grace, the housekeeper's expression softened, he tries. He reads to her, brings her gifts, sits with her for hours. But he's a soldier and a duke. He doesn't know how to reach a little girl's heart. Has he always been her guardian? Since the day she was born. His brother, the late Captain Thorne, died when Amelia was barely 6 months old. Same battle where your husband fell, I believe. Mrs. Pembroke's gaze sharpened. His Grace became Duke at 26 when his father died unexpectedly, inherited a crumbling estate, crushing debts, and a baby niece. He could have sent her away to relatives. Instead, he rebuilt this abbey stone by stone, repaid every debt, and kept Amelia here because he'd made his dying brother a promise that she would grow up loved. Eleanor's throat tightened. But 6 months ago, the housekeeper continued, Amelia's nurse, the woman who'd cared for her since infancy, died of a fever. Amelia adored her, and the child just stopped. Stopped speaking, stopped smiling, stopped everything but breathing and staring. Grief, Eleanor murmured. Yes, but no one could reach her. The governesses came and went. One called her a changeling. Another said she needed an asylum. Mrs. Pembroke's voice hardened. His Grace dismissed them all. He's been waiting for someone who would see Amelia, not her silence. Eleanor looked at the fire, thinking of her own children sleeping in the next room. I can't promise I'll succeed. No one's asking for promises, madam. Just effort. Just kindness. Mrs. Pembroke moved toward the door, then paused. One more thing. His Grace's study is in the East Wing. If you need anything, anything at all, go to him. He doesn't sleep much. You'll find him there most nights. Thank you, Mrs.
Pembroke. The housekeeper nodded and left Eleanor alone with her tea and her thoughts. Eleanor met Amelia the next morning. She woke to pale winter sunlight streaming through the windows and the sound of her children laughing, actually laughing, in the bedroom. Eleanor rushed in to find them bouncing on the beds, pink-cheeked and healthy, a maid named Betsy giggling as she tried to coax them into getting dressed. "Mama!" Thomas launched himself at Eleanor. "There are stables with horses, and Betsy says there's a library with 1,000 books." 10,000, Betsy corrected, grinning. "Morning, ma'am. Mrs. Pembroke said to let you sleep, but your little ones were too excited to stay quiet." Eleanor hugged her son, relief flooding through her. "It's all right.
I should be up anyway. After breakfast, served in their suite, a feast of eggs and toast and jam, Eleanor dressed in one of the simple but well-made gowns Mrs. Pembroke had left for her. Dark blue wool, modest and warm. She braided her dark hair, pinched her cheeks for color, and tried not to feel like an imposter. Mrs. Pembroke appeared at 9 o'clock sharp. "Lady Amelia is in the morning room, madam. His Grace requests that you meet her there." Eleanor's heart hammered. "And my children? Betsy will take them to the kitchens for biscuits, then the library. They'll be well supervised, I promise." Eleanor kissed Thomas and Iris, whispered that she'd return soon, and followed Mrs. Pembroke through the Abbey's winding corridors. The morning room was lovely, all white and gold, with tall windows overlooking a snow-covered garden. The Duke of Greymore stood near the windows, looking impossibly tall and formal in charcoal gray, and sitting in a chair by the fire, so still she might have been a portrait, was a little girl. Amelia Thorne had her mother's eyes, Mrs. Pembroke had said so, which meant they were the palest blue, like ice catching sunlight. Her hair was dark like her uncle's, falling in soft curls to her shoulders. She wore a white dress with pink ribbons, and her hands were folded in her lap with unnatural stillness. She didn't look at Eleanor. She stared at the fire as if the rest of the world didn't exist. "Amelia," the Duke said quietly, "this is Mrs. Ashford. She's going to be your new governess." The child didn't react, didn't blink. Eleanor's heart broke a little. She crossed the room slowly, pulled a chair close to Amelia's, but not too close, and sat down. She didn't speak immediately. Instead, she studied the little girl with the careful attention she'd give a wounded bird, looking for where it hurt, where she could help without causing more pain. "Hello, Amelia," Eleanor said softly. "My name is Eleanor. I have 2 children of my own, Thomas and Iris. They're probably eating biscuits in the kitchen right now and making a magnificent mess." Nothing, not even a flicker. Eleanor kept her voice gentle. "I'm told you love horses. So does Thomas. He's 7, and he's desperate to learn to ride. Perhaps, if you wanted, you could show him the stables sometime. I think he'd be in awe of someone who knows about horses." Amelia's fingers twitched, just barely. "I also heard you love fairy tales," Eleanor continued. "I used to tell Iris stories every night about princesses and dragons and magic forests, but I've run out of new ones. I was hoping you might know some I haven't heard." The pale blue eyes shifted. Just for a heartbeat, they moved toward Eleanor, then away. Progress. "I won't force you to talk," Eleanor said, "or smile, or do anything you're not ready for, but I'll be here, every day, and if you ever want to tell me something, with words, or drawings, or even just to look, I'll listen." Silence, but it felt different now, less like a wall and more like a health breath. Eleanor stood. "I'll leave you to your morning, Amelia, but I'll come back this afternoon, if that's all right." "Perhaps we can sit together. You don't have to say anything. We can just be." She turned to go, and a voice, small, rusty from disuse, barely more than a whisper, stopped her cold. Does Iris like fairy tales too?" Eleanor spun around. Amelia was looking at her now, fully, those ice-pale eyes filled with something desperate and fragile. "Yes," Eleanor breathed. "She loves them." "Could she," Amelia's voice cracked, "could she come to hear the stories?" Eleanor's throat closed. She glanced at the Duke, whose expression was carefully blank, but his eyes blazed with something raw and grateful. "Of course she can," Eleanor said. "She'd love to meet you." Amelia nodded once, then turned back to the fire. But her hands, Eleanor noticed, were no longer clenched. They rested open in her lap, like she'd let go of something heavy. The first week at Greymore passed in a strange, gentle rhythm. Every afternoon, Eleanor brought Iris to the morning room. Amelia never spoke directly to the younger girl, but she listened when Iris chattered about her dolls, or the snow, or the cat she'd found in the stables. And slowly, so slowly Eleanor almost didn't notice, Amelia began to respond. A nod, a tiny smile. Once, when Iris asked if Amelia wanted to see her draw a horse, Amelia whispered, "Yes." Thomas, meanwhile, had found his own place at Graymore. The stablemaster, a gruff man named Mr. Davies, had taken the boy under his wing, teaching him to curry the horses and muck out stalls. Thomas came back to their suite every evening filthy and ecstatic, talking about a mare named Moonlight and how Mr. Davies said he had good hands. Eleanor's role expanded naturally. She taught Amelia mathematics and French in the mornings, but she also read to her. Fairy tales, yes, but also poetry and history. She discovered that Amelia loved music, so Eleanor played the pianoforte in the music room, and Amelia would sit nearby, her eyes closed, something peaceful crossing her small face. And through it all, the Duke of Graymore watched. He was a constant, quiet presence. He joined them for tea sometimes, asking Amelia gentle questions about her day. He praised her when she completed a particularly difficult sum. Once, Eleanor found him reading to Amelia in the library, a book about Greek myths, his deep voice turning gods and heroes into something magical. But he never intruded, never pushed. And when Amelia spoke, which was rare but growing more frequent, he listened as if her words were treasures. Eleanor found herself watching him too. She noticed the way his shoulders relaxed when Amelia smiled, the way he always made sure Eleanor had everything she needed, books, supplies, time. The way he'd quietly arranged for a seamstress to make new dresses for Eleanor and her children, refusing to let her protest. "You're part of this household now," he'd said when Eleanor tried to thank him. "You'll be dressed accordingly." She noticed other things too, the scar through his eyebrow, the way his hands were always ink-stained from correspondence, the shadows under his eyes that suggested Mrs. Pembroke was right. He didn't sleep much. And she noticed the way he looked at her sometimes, like he was trying to solve a puzzle, or perhaps like he'd found something unexpected and didn't quite know what to do with it. It was unnerving and thrilling and absolutely entirely inappropriate for a widowed governess to feel about her employer. Eleanor reminded herself of this every night when she couldn't sleep, lying in her comfortable bed and thinking about storm-gray eyes and a voice like gravel and silk. The boundary between them was clear. She was grateful. That was all. But gratitude, Eleanor was learning, could be a dangerous thing when it tangled with something else, something she didn't have a name for yet. The breaking point came 2 weeks after Eleanor's arrival. It was late afternoon, and Eleanor was in the music room with Amelia. They'd been working on a simple melody on the pianoforte, Amelia's small fingers stumbling over the keys, her face scrunched in concentration. "I can't," Amelia said suddenly, her voice frustrated. "I can't remember it." "That's all right," Eleanor said gently. "We'll practice until—" "No!" Amelia's hand slammed down on the keys, a discordant crash. "I can't do anything right. I can't make Uncle Sebastian happy. I can't make the music work. I can't even talk properly anymore. I'm broken." Eleanor's breath caught. "Amelia." "My papa died because I was bad," the little girl whispered, tears streaming down her face. "And then Nanny died because I wasn't good enough to make her want to stay. Everyone leaves. Everyone always leaves." And then she was sobbing, great wrenching sobs that shook her tiny frame. Eleanor didn't think. She pulled Amelia into her arms and held her tight, rocking her the way she'd rocked her own children through nightmares and grief. "No, sweetheart. No, no, no. You are not broken. You are hurting, and that's different." "It's the same," Amelia choked out. "It's not." Eleanor smoothed the girl's hair. "Your papa died because of a war, because of choices made by men far away, not because of you. And your nanny, she got sick. That's not your fault either. Sickness doesn't care how good or bad someone is. It just happens. But I couldn't save her." "Oh, darling," Eleanor's own tears started. "Neither could I. Neither could your uncle. Some things are too big for us to fix, no matter how much we love someone." Amelia clung to her, and Eleanor held on, whispering the words she wished someone had said to her months ago. "You are loved, you are wanted, and you are exactly enough, just as you are."
They stayed like that until the sobs quieted into hiccups and Amelia's breathing evened out. When Eleanor finally pulled back, she found the Duke standing in the doorway. She had no idea how long he'd been there. His face was a mask, but his eyes were molten, grief and fury and something Eleanor couldn't name. "Amelia," he said quietly, crossing the room in 3 strides. "Look at me." The little girl turned, her face blotchy and tear-stained. The Duke knelt so they were eye to eye. "Your father was the bravest man I knew. He died fighting for something he believed in, protecting people who couldn't protect themselves. He would never, ever want you to think his death was your fault." His voice roughened. "And neither would Nanny. She loved you. Do you understand? She loved you so much that the last thing she said before she died was your name." Amelia's eyes went wide. "She did?" "She did. She made me promise to tell you she was sorry, that she didn't want to leave you. That if she could have stayed, she would have." The Duke's jaw clenched. "I should have told you sooner. I was trying to protect you from more pain, but instead I let you believe a lie." "I'm sorry," Amelia whispered. "Don't you dare apologize." The Duke cupped her face gently. "You are the strongest person in this household. Do you know how I know?" She shook her head. "Because you kept breathing. Even when it hurt, even when you wanted to give up, you kept going." He glanced at Eleanor, something raw in his expression. "And now you have Mrs. Ashford, who understands that better than anyone." Amelia turned to Eleanor. "You do?" Eleanor's throat was too tight to speak, so she just nodded. Amelia threw her arms around Eleanor's neck, then reached for her uncle. The Duke gathered them both into an embrace, awkward and fierce, and so full of love that Eleanor felt something crack open in her chest. When they finally pulled apart, Amelia was smiling, tentative and watery, but real.
"Can we play the song again?" she asked Eleanor. "I want to try." "Of course." The Duke stood, his hand briefly touching Eleanor's shoulder, a thank you, or a promise, or both. Then he left, and Eleanor and Amelia bent over the pianoforte keys, building something fragile and beautiful from the wreckage of grief. That night, Eleanor couldn't sleep. She tried. She lay in bed, staring at the canopy, listening to her children's soft breathing in the next room. But her mind wouldn't quiet. It kept replaying the look in the Duke's eyes when he'd found her holding Amelia, the weight of his hand on her shoulder. Finally, she gave up. She pulled on her robe and slippers and slipped out of her suite, intending to fetch a book from the library. But her feet carried her east instead, to the study Mrs. Pembroke had mentioned. The door was ajar, lamplight spilling into the corridor. Eleanor hesitated, then knocked softly. "Come in." The Duke's voice was tired. He was at his desk, surrounded by papers, still dressed in his shirt and waistcoat, though his jacket and cravat had been discarded. He looked up when Eleanor entered, surprise flickering across his face. "Mrs. Ashford, is something wrong?" "No. Eleanor hesitated. "I couldn't sleep. I was going to the library, but I wanted to thank you for what you said to Amelia." The Duke set down his pen. "I should have said it months ago." "You said it when she could hear it." Eleanor stepped closer. "That's what matters." He studied her in the lamplight, and Eleanor was suddenly acutely aware that she was in his private study, in her nightclothes, with her hair loose around her shoulders, and proper didn't begin to cover it. "I should go," she said quickly. "Stay." The word was quiet, but absolute. "Please." Eleanor's pulse jumped. "Your Grace." "Sebastian." He stood, moving around the desk. "When it's just us, call me Sebastian." "That's not appropriate." "Nothing about the situation is appropriate, Mrs.
Ashford. He stopped a few feet away, close enough that she could see the exhaustion in his eyes. "I hired you in a blizzard. I brought you into my home based on instinct. I'm asking you to save a child I don't know how to reach. And now, he paused. Now I'm standing here at midnight, wanting to know everything about you, and I can't justify it except to say that you fascinate me. Eleanor's breath stopped. Your Grace. Sebastian. Sebastian, she whispered, and the name felt dangerous on her tongue. You're my employee, a widowed governess with 2 children and a ruined reputation. You're a duke. This, whatever this is, it's impossible. I know. His voice was rough. Believe me, I know. But I can't stop wondering what you're thinking when you look at me. If you feel even a fraction of this. He gestured between them, frustrated. This pull. Eleanor should have lied, should have said no, of course not. How dare you suggest such a thing? Instead, she said yes. The word hung between them like a confession. Sebastian closed his eyes briefly, his control visibly fraying. We can't. I know. You're under my protection. I won't take advantage. I know, Eleanor said again, and I'm not asking you to. I'm telling the truth. Because you asked, and because I'm tired of pretending that gratitude is the only thing I feel when I look at you. Sebastian's eyes opened, blazing. What else do you feel? Eleanor should have walked away, should have protected herself, her position, her children's future. But she was so tired of running. I feel alive, she said quietly. For the first time in years, I feel like I'm not just surviving, I'm living. And part of that is Amelia and my children being safe and having purpose again. But part of it, she met his gaze. Part of it is you. The way you listen, the way you see people, really see them. The way you kneel for a grieving child and speak to her like she matters. She does matter. I know. That's why. Eleanor swallowed. That's why I can't ignore this. Because you're not what I expected. You're not the cold, ruthless duke everyone fears. You're someone who cares so deeply, it terrifies you. Sebastian moved closer. Just one step, but it closed the distance between them to something breathless. You're wrong about one thing. What? I am cold. I am ruthless. I've made decisions that haunt me. I've hurt people in the name of duty and survival. His voice dropped. But with you, with Amelia, I want to be better. I want to be the man you think I am. Eleanor's hand lifted before she could stop it, touching his chest, just over his heart. You already are. He caught her hand, held it there. His heart was racing, she realized, as fast as hers. If we do this, he said roughly, if we acknowledge this thing between us, it changes everything. Your position here, Amelia's recovery, the whole carefully balanced structure I've built. Then we don't do this. Eleanor tried to pull her hand back, but he held it gently. I didn't say we shouldn't. Sebastian's thumb brushed over her knuckles. I said it changes things. But maybe some things need to change. What are you suggesting? I don't know yet, he smiled, the first real smile she'd seen from him, and it transformed his face from severe to devastating. I'm a duke. I'm supposed to have plans and strategies and 12 contingencies. But with you, Mrs. Ashford, I'm improvising. Eleanor. What? If you're Sebastian to me, then I'm Eleanor to you. He said her name like a prayer. Eleanor. And then, because they were both fools or both brave or both desperate for something real, he pulled her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles, a gesture that should have been chaste but felt like a brand. Go back to your room, he said, his voice strained, before I do something we'll both regret. Eleanor went. But she carried the warmth of that kiss all the way back to her suite, and when she finally slept, she dreamed of storm-gray eyes and a future that seemed impossible, but felt, for the first time, achingly real. The next morning, Eleanor woke to chaos. Betsy was pounding on her door, her voice panicked. Mrs. Ashford, please wake up. It's Lady Amelia. She's gone. Eleanor bolted upright, heart racing. What do you mean, gone? She's not in her room. We've searched the Abbey. She's nowhere. Eleanor threw on her robe and ran. The household was in uproar. Servants searched every room, calling Amelia's name. The Duke was in the entrance hall, already dressed, barking orders to footmen to search the grounds. "When was she last seen?" Eleanor demanded. "Her maid checked on her at 6, Mrs. Pembroke said, wringing her hands. "The bed was empty." Eleanor's mind raced. Where would a grieving 8-year-old girl go? Somewhere safe, somewhere that made her feel close to the people she'd lost. "The stables," Eleanor said suddenly. "She loves horses." Sebastian's head snapped toward her. Davies checked. Not thoroughly enough. Eleanor was already moving toward the door. She's small, she could hide. They ran, Eleanor, Sebastian, and 3 footmen, through the snow to the stables. The building was warm, smelling of hay and horses, the animals shifting in their stalls. "Amelia," Sebastian called. "Amelia, if you're here, please answer. You're not in trouble. I just need to know you're safe." Silence. Eleanor walked slowly down the aisle, looking into each stall, and then she heard it, the softest sniffle from the last stall, where a gentle gray mare named Mist stood. Eleanor opened the door carefully. Amelia was curled in the corner, her arms wrapped around her knees, tears streaming down her face. "Oh, sweetheart," Eleanor knelt beside her. "What happened?" "I heard you," Amelia whispered, "last night, talking to Uncle Sebastian. You said—"
"You said you felt alive here, but then you'll leave, won't you? When the year is over, you'll leave like everyone else." Eleanor's heart shattered. "Amelia, everyone leaves," the little girl's voice broke. "I love you, and you'll leave, and I'll be alone again." Eleanor pulled her close, rocking her. "Listen to me. Listen. I'm not going anywhere. Do you hear me? I made a promise to stay for 1 year, yes, but that doesn't mean I want to leave. It means I wanted to be sure, to give you time to trust me." "But what if you change your mind?" "I won't." Eleanor cupped Amelia's tear-stained face. "I love you too. You and this place and—" She glanced up to find Sebastian standing in the stall doorway, his expression raw. "I'm not running anymore. I'm staying, for as long as he'll have me." Amelia looked at her uncle. "Promise?" Sebastian knelt beside them both. "If Mrs. Ashford wants to stay, she'll have a place here forever. Not as a governess, but as family." His eyes met Eleanor's. "If she'll have us." Eleanor couldn't breathe, couldn't think, could only feel the weight of what he was offering, not just employment, but belonging. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes." Amelia threw her arms around both of them, and this time when they embraced, it didn't feel fragile. It felt like a foundation. The scandal broke 3 days later. A letter arrived from London, sent by an acquaintance of the late Captain Ashford's mother. It was addressed to the Duke of Greymoor, concerning the woman claiming to be Mrs. Eleanor Ashford. Sebastian read it in his study, his face turning to stone. Eleanor knew something was wrong the moment he summoned her. She entered the study to find him standing by the fire, the letter in his hand, fury radiating from every line of his body. "What is it?" Eleanor asked. He handed her the letter without a word. Eleanor read, and her blood turned to ice. "Your Grace, I write out of concern for your reputation and that of your innocent ward."
The woman styling herself as Eleanor Ashford is, I regret to inform you, not merely a disgraced widow, but a suspected adulteress. Multiple sources claim she conducted an affair with her husband's commanding officer while Captain Ashford was in the field, an affair that led to the captain's mental decline and eventual death. Furthermore, it is alleged that her children may not be the captain's legitimate offspring. I urge you to remove this woman from your household before her moral corruption spreads. Sincerely, Lady Margaret Holbrook. Eleanor's hands shook. "It's not true. None of it is true." "I know." Sebastian's voice was lethal calm, the voice of a man preparing for war. "But others won't. Lady Holbrook is a notorious gossip. By now, half of London knows she's written to me. They'll be waiting to see what I do." "Then send me away," Eleanor's voice broke, "before this touches you or Amelia." "Absolutely not." "Sebastian, no." He crossed to her in 2 strides, gripping her shoulders. "I won't let them destroy you. Not again." "You can't stop gossip." "No, but I can control the narrative." His eyes blazed. "There's only one way to silence this completely. One way to put you permanently beyond their reach." Eleanor's breath caught.
What are you suggesting? Marry me. The world stopped. What? Marry me, Sebastian repeated, his voice rough with certainty. Not in a year, not when the gossip fades. Now, immediately. As my Duchess, you'll have my name, my protection, and my power. No one will dare whisper against you. Eleanor stared at him. You can't be serious. I've never been more serious. He cupped her face. I know it's fast. I know it's mad. But Eleanor, I'm not offering this just to protect you from scandal. I'm offering because I want you. Because I want a life with you and your children and Amelia. Because somewhere between that blizzard and this moment, I fell in love with you. Eleanor's tears started. You love me? Desperately. He smiled, crooked, real.
I love your strength, your stubbornness, the way you fight for the people you care about, the way you see past everyone's armor, including mine. His thumb brushed her tears away. Say yes, please. I'm not a duchess. I don't know how to be one. Neither did I know how to be a duke. We'll learn together. The ton will say you married beneath you. Let them. Sebastian's voice turned fierce. You're worth 100 of them, and anyone who can't see that doesn't deserve a place in our lives. Eleanor looked at this impossible, extraordinary man, the cold duke who knelt for grieving children, who'd stopped in a blizzard for a desperate stranger, who was offering her not just protection, but love. My children, she whispered, will be mine, legally, fully. I'll adopt them the day we marry. And Amelia? Will finally have the mother she's needed all along. Eleanor laughed through her tears. This is insane. Probably. Sebastian pulled her close. Say yes anyway. And Eleanor, who'd spent years being told she wasn't worthy, who'd run through a blizzard rather than beg, who'd believed she would never be anything but broken, Eleanor chose to believe in one more impossible thing. Yes, she said. Yes, I'll marry you. Sebastian kissed her then, a kiss that tasted like promise and homecoming and the end of running. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, he rested his forehead against hers. I'll get a special license. We can be married within 3 days. 3 days? Eleanor's head spun. I'm not giving you time to panic and run. He grinned, actually grinned. You're mine now, Eleanor Ashford, or you will be. Eleanor Thorne, Duchess of Greymore. It sounded like a fairy tale. It sounded like home. They were married in the Abbey's private chapel on a snowy December morning. Amelia was Eleanor's flower girl, beaming in a white dress and scattering rose petals with solemn concentration. Thomas served as Sebastian's impromptu page, holding the rings with fierce pride. Iris sat with Mrs. Pembroke in the front pew, whispering loudly that Eleanor looked like a princess. Eleanor wore a gown of ivory silk that Sebastian had somehow procured in 2 days, simple, elegant, with lace at the cuffs and pearl buttons down the back. Her hair was dressed with white roses. And when Sebastian turned to face her at the altar, when he took her hands and spoke his vows in that deep, steady voice, Eleanor finally understood what it meant to be chosen. Not despite her past, but with it. All of her, the grief, the mistakes, the strength forged in fire. I, Sebastian Edward Thorne, take you, Eleanor Grace Ashford, to be my wife. When the vicar pronounced them married, Sebastian kissed her with a tenderness that made Eleanor's knees weak. The small gathering, just household staff and the vicar, applauded. Your Grace, Sebastian murmured against her lips. Eleanor smiled. Your Grace. They celebrated with a wedding breakfast in the dining room, a feast that Mrs. Pembroke had orchestrated with military precision. Amelia sat between Eleanor and Sebastian, chattering excitedly about everything from the flowers to the cake to whether Eleanor would still tell her stories now that she was a duchess. Every single night, Eleanor promised. Thomas asked if being a duke's son meant he could have his own horse. Sebastian, with perfect seriousness, said they'd discuss it. And Iris, halfway through her second piece of cake, announced to the entire table, I knew Mama would marry a king. I told Thomas." Everyone laughed, even Sebastian, whose rare, genuine laugh was the most beautiful sound Eleanor had ever heard. That night, after the children were tucked into bed, Amelia in her own room, Thomas and Iris in the nursery wing being transformed into proper children's suites, Eleanor stood in the Duchess's chambers, staring at herself in the mirror.
The Duchess's chambers, her chambers now, connected to Sebastian's by a door that stood open. She heard him enter and turned. He'd removed his jacket and cravat, rolled up his sleeves. He looked younger like this, less like the formidable Duke of Greymore, and more like the man who'd stopped in a blizzard for a desperate stranger. "Nervous?" he asked softly. "Terrified," Eleanor admitted. He crossed to her, taking her hands. "We don't have to." "I want to," Eleanor met his eyes. I haven't been anyone's wife in a long time, and I was never anyone's duchess." "Good," Sebastian smiled. "I don't want you to be anyone you've been before. I want you to be exactly who you are now. The woman who tells me when I'm being too rigid, who makes Amelia laugh, who's brave enough to walk into a blizzard rather than lose her dignity." "I was stupid to do that. You were proud and human and magnificent." He pulled her close. "Eleanor, I don't need you to be perfect. I need you to be real. Can you do that?" She thought about the year ahead, learning to navigate a world that had always been close to her, about raising 3 children with this extraordinary, complicated man, about building a life from the wreckage of 2 broken pasts. "I can try," she said. "Then that's enough." When Sebastian kissed her this time, there was no audience, no vows, no ceremony, just the 2 of them, choosing each other in the quiet of a December night. And when morning came, Eleanor woke as a duchess, with her husband's arms around her, and winter sunlight streaming through the windows of Greymore Abbey. The gossip reached them 3 days after the wedding. Lady Holbrook had been busy. Letters circulated through London drawing rooms, each one more vicious than the last. "The Duke of Greymore has married his ward's governess in unseemly haste. The new duchess is a woman of ill repute, suspected of adultery. The Duke's judgment has been compromised by infatuation."
Sebastian read the reports his London solicitor sent and tossed them into the fire. "Let them talk," he said when Eleanor expressed concern. "By next season, there will be a new scandal. They'll forget all about us." But Eleanor wasn't so sure. The first test came when Lady Holbrook herself arrived at Greymore, ostensibly to pay her respects to the new duchess. In reality, Eleanor suspected, to deliver her venom in person. Eleanor received her in the drawing room, wearing a day dress of deep emerald that made her look every inch a duchess. Sebastian stood beside her, a united front. Lady Holbrook was 60, sharp-featured, and dressed in black silk that seemed to suck the warmth from the room. She took Eleanor's measure with cold eyes. "Your Grace," she said, her curtsy barely adequate. "How unexpected to meet you." "Unexpected?" Eleanor kept her voice pleasant. "I should think my marriage was announced quite publicly, Lady Holbrook." "Oh, the announcement was public. The circumstances were less so." The older woman's smile was a blade. "Tell me, did His Grace know about your colorful past before the wedding, or did you neglect to mention it?" Sebastian's hand tightened on Eleanor's, but she squeezed back, a silent message. "I've got this." "I told my husband everything," Eleanor said calmly. "About my late husband's struggles, about the lies spread by his family, about my reasons for accepting the position here. He knew it all, and he chose to marry me anyway." "How charitable of him." "No," Eleanor's voice hardened. "How wise, because he saw past gossip to the truth, something you, Lady Holbrook, seem incapable of doing." The older woman's eyes narrowed. "You dare." "I dare many things." Eleanor stepped forward, no longer the frightened widow, but the Duchess of Greymore. "I dare to defend myself against slander. I dare to build a life with a man I love and children I would die for. And I dare to tell you quite plainly that your poison has no power here. The Tun will never accept you." "The Tun," Sebastian said, his voice like ice, "will accept my wife, or they will find themselves no longer welcome at Greymore, or at any event I host, sponsor, or attend. As I'm quite sure you're aware, Lady Holbrook, that encompasses a significant portion of London society." The threat was clear. Lady Holbrook's face went white. "This isn't over," she hissed. "Oh, but it is," Eleanor smiled. The same smile she'd seen Sebastian use when he was being dangerously polite. "You've lost, my lady. The Duke married me. I'm his Duchess, and no amount of gossip will change that. Now, I believe you have a long journey back to London. I won't keep you." It was a dismissal. A duchess dismissing a mere lady. Lady Holbrook knew it. Her mouth opened, closed. Then she turned and swept from the room in a rustle of black silk. When the door closed, Eleanor sagged against Sebastian, suddenly shaking. "Did I just do that?" she whispered. "You did." Sebastian turned her to face him, pride blazing in his eyes. "You magnificent, terrifying woman. That was brilliant." "I wasn't sure I could." "I was." He kissed her forehead. "You're stronger than any of them, Eleanor. They just don't know it yet." But Eleanor was learning. Day by day, she was learning to wear her title not as a costume, but as armor. Spring came to Greymore in a riot of color. The gardens bloomed. The children, all three of them now, as Eleanor thought of Amelia, played in the sunshine. Thomas finally got his horse, a gentle gelding named Copper. Iris learned to read, sounding out words with fierce concentration. And Amelia transformed. She laughed now, loudly, freely. She talked constantly about her lessons, her favorite books, the kittens born in the stable. She'd started calling Eleanor Mama one afternoon in May, tentatively, as if testing the word. Eleanor had pulled her close and whispered, "I love you too, sweetheart." The past wasn't forgotten. There were still hard days. Days when Amelia missed her nanny, or Eleanor woke from nightmares about the blizzard, or Sebastian retreated into the cold Duke persona when business was difficult. But they were building something real. A family stitched together from broken pieces, held by love and stubbornness, and the bone-deep belief that they deserved happiness. Eleanor's role as Duchess expanded. She opened the Abbey to a monthly salon for local artists and writers. She funded a school in the village for children whose parents couldn't afford education. She corresponded with other duchesses, slowly building alliances. And when invitations came from London, for the season, for balls and dinners, Sebastian always asked Eleanor if she was ready. "We don't have to go," he said one evening, as they sat in the library, his head in her lap while she read aloud. "London can wait." But Eleanor was done running, done hiding. "No," she said quietly. "We'll go. I'm the Duchess of Greymore. It's time I acted like it." Sebastian sat up, studying her face. "You're sure?" "I'm terrified," Eleanor admitted. "But I'm also angry at everyone who tried to break me. I want to walk into those ballrooms on your arm and show them I survived, that I'm thriving." "Then we'll go." Sebastian's smile was fierce. "And if anyone dares slight you, they'll answer to me." The London season of 1819 would be remembered for many things. But perhaps most of all, it would be remembered for the night the Duke and Duchess of Greymore arrived at the Harrington Ball. They entered at the top of the grand staircase, Sebastian in black evening wear that made him look like controlled storm, Eleanor in a gown of sapphire silk that matched her eyes, diamonds glittering at her throat and in her hair. The ballroom fell silent. Every eye turned to them, assessing, judging, whispering.
Eleanor felt the weight of it, the crushing pressure of 1,000 unspoken questions. Who is she? Is she really the governess? Is it true she was accused of adultery? Sebastian leaned close, his breath warm against her ear. "Chin up, Your Grace. You're magnificent. Let them look." So Eleanor lifted her chin. She descended the stairs with her hand on Sebastian's arm, meeting every stare with cool composure.
Lady Holbrook was there. Eleanor saw her whispering to a cluster of matrons. But she also saw other faces: curiosity, intrigue, and even grudging respect. The first test came when the Duchess of Pemberton, a formidable woman in her 70s, the undisputed queen of society, approached them. "Graymore," she said, nodding to Sebastian. Then she turned to Eleanor. "Your Grace, I've heard much about you." Eleanor's heart hammered, but her voice stayed steady. "I hope some of it was even true, Your Grace." The Duchess of Pemberton's lips twitched. "I like you. You have spine. London needs more of that and less simpering." She gestured with her fan. "Walk with me. I wish to hear about this school you founded." It was an endorsement, a public, unmistakable endorsement from one of society's most powerful women. Sebastian squeezed Eleanor's hand, a brief, secret gesture, and let her go. Eleanor walked through the ballroom on the arm of the Duchess of Pemberton, answering questions about education and charity work, and she realized something profound. She wasn't pretending anymore. She was the Duchess of Graymore, not because of her title, but because she'd earned it, through survival, through love, through refusing to let the world's cruelty define her. When she rejoined Sebastian, he was surrounded by gentlemen discussing politics, but his eyes found hers immediately, and what she saw there, pride, love, absolute certainty, steadied her more than any title ever could. "Dance with me," he murmured when the music started.
They waltzed in the center of the ballroom, the Duke and his Duchess, and Eleanor finally understood what it meant to come home. Not to a place, but to a person. They returned to Graymore 3 weeks later, exhausted but triumphant. The season had been a success. Eleanor had charmed the Duchess of Pemberton, befriended several influential ladies, and silenced the worst of the gossip through sheer force of competence and grace. More importantly, she'd proven, to herself if no one else, that she belonged. The children greeted them in the entrance hall, Amelia and Thomas shouting stories about everything they'd done while their parents were away, Iris clinging to Eleanor's skirts. "We missed you," Amelia said, suddenly shy. "We missed you too," Eleanor said, pulling her close, "so very much." That night, after the children were asleep, Eleanor and Sebastian sat in their favorite spot, the library, with its floor-to-ceiling books and the fire crackling in the hearth. "What are you thinking?" Sebastian asked, watching her. Eleanor considered. "I'm thinking about the blizzard, about how terrified I was, how close I came to losing everything." "Regrets?" "No." She turned to him, this man who'd saved her life and then given her a reason to live it. "Gratitude. Because that blizzard led me here. To you. To Amelia. To this life I never imagined I could have." Sebastian pulled her into his arms. "You know what I think?" "What?" "I think you saved yourself. I just gave you a warm carriage and a place to land." He kissed her hair. "Everything else, rebuilding your life, loving Amelia, becoming a duchess, that was all you." Eleanor wanted to argue, but she was learning to accept compliments, to believe, maybe, that she was as strong as Sebastian claimed. "I love you," she said instead. "I love you too." Sebastian's arms tightened. "My brave, stubborn, magnificent duchess." Outside, snow began to fall, gentle this time, beautiful rather than brutal.
Eleanor watched it through the window and thought about second chances, about how sometimes the worst moments of our lives are actually doorways to the best ones, about how a blizzard, a desperate prayer, and a duke's impossible offer could change everything. "Come with me," Sebastian said suddenly, standing and offering his hand. "Where?" "You'll see." Eleanor took his hand. Always she would take his hand, and let him lead her through the abbey, up staircases and down corridors, until they reached a door she'd never noticed before. Sebastian opened it to reveal a tower room, circular, with windows on all sides offering views of the snow-covered estate. And in the center, a desk,
bookshelves, and a chaise lounge by a small fireplace. "What is this?" Eleanor breathed. "Your study." Sebastian's smile was soft. "Every duchess needs a private place, somewhere to think, to work, to be herself. I had it prepared while we were in London." Eleanor walked slowly around the room, trailing her fingers over the books. Volumes on education, philosophy, poetry. There was paper and ink, a globe, even a small telescope by one window. "It's perfect," she whispered. "So are you." Eleanor turned to find Sebastian watching her with an expression that still, even after months of marriage, made her breath catch. "I'm not perfect," she said. "I'm broken in places, scarred, still learning how to be this person you see." "Then let me tell you what I see." Sebastian crossed to her, cupping her face. "I see a woman who walked into a blizzard rather than beg, who held her children close even when she had no warmth left to give, who faced a ballroom full of gossips and walked out victorious." His thumb brushed her cheek. "I see the woman I love, scars and all, broken places and all, perfect in her imperfection." Eleanor's tears fell, but they were good tears, the kind that came from being seen, truly seen, for the first time in her life. "Thank you," she said. For stopping in the blizzard, for seeing past the widow everyone else condemned, for giving me a chance. "Thank you," Sebastian replied, "for taking it, for staying, for loving my niece and this broken duke who didn't know he needed saving until you saved him." They kissed in Eleanor's tower room as snow fell outside, and it felt like an ending and a beginning all at once. The story of the widow who walked into a blizzard, and the duke who said, "Come with me," and the family they built from the wreckage of two broken lives. A family held together by love, forged in the coldest winter and blooming into the warmest spring. A family, at last, come home. 5 years later. The ballroom at Greymore Abbey glittered with candlelight and laughter. Eleanor stood at the edge of the room, watching her children dance. Thomas, 12 now, tall and confident, partnered with a blushing young lady from the village. Iris, 11, twirled with Amelia, both girls giggling as they spun. And Amelia, oh, Amelia, 13 years old, vibrant and brilliant, with her uncle's stubbornness and Eleanor's heart. She'd never stopped talking since that first breakthrough, and Eleanor wouldn't have it any other way. A small hand tugged Eleanor's skirt. She looked down to find her youngest daughter, Catherine, 3 years old, with Sebastian's gray eyes and Eleanor's dark curls, staring up at her solemnly. "Mama, can I dance too?" "Of course, my darling." Eleanor scooped her up. "Shall we find Papa?" They found Sebastian exactly where Eleanor expected, by the refreshment table, deep in conversation with the Duchess of Pemberton about some political matter. But the moment he saw Catherine, his stern expression melted. "There's my girl." He took his daughter from Eleanor's arms, lifting her high enough to make her shriek with delight. "Ready to dance?" Catherine nodded frantically. Sebastian waltzed across the ballroom with their daughter in his arms, her little feet perched on his shoes, and Eleanor's heart swelled so full she thought it might burst. "You look happy," a familiar voice said. Eleanor turned to find Mrs. Pembroke beside her, older now, her hair more silver than brown, but her eyes still sharp. "I am happy," Eleanor said simply. "Good." The housekeeper's smile was warm. "You've earned it, Your Grace, every bit of it." Eleanor thought about the woman she'd been 5 years ago, desperate, frozen, certain her life was over. She thought about the blizzard, the carriage, the impossible offer. She thought about how sometimes salvation comes not as a gentle rescue, but as a challenge. Come with me. Trust me. Choose this impossible, terrifying, beautiful thing. "Mrs. Pembroke," Eleanor said quietly, "do you remember the night the Duke brought me here?" "As if it were yesterday." "Did you think," Eleanor paused, "did you think I'd stay? That this would work?" The housekeeper considered. "I thought you were brave enough to try. That was all anyone could ask." Brave enough to try. Eleanor watched her family, all of them, blood and chosen,
dancing and laughing in the ballroom she'd helped restore. She thought of the school in the village, now educating 50 children, the salon that brought artists and writers to Graymore monthly, the letters from Great for Family she'd helped, the life she'd built from the ashes of the one she'd lost. Sebastian caught her eye across the room and smiled, that rare, devastating smile he saved just for her. He mouthed something that looked like, "I love you." Eleanor mouthed it back. And she realized that she was no longer the widow who'd walked into a blizzard. She was the Duchess of Graymore. She was a mother, a wife, a woman who'd found her strength in the coldest winter and her home in the warmest heart. She was Eleanor Thorne. And she was, finally, exactly where she belonged.
The snow fell softly outside the windows of Graymore Abbey, gentle and beautiful, no longer something to fear, but something to marvel at. A reminder that even the coldest nights eventually give way to dawn. Eleanor walked on to the ballroom floor and took Sebastian's free hand while he still held Catherine. And together, the Duke, the Duchess, and the daughter they made, they danced beneath the chandeliers as the snow painted the world white and new. The end.